about what you found out in the mid-'80s. At this point, Nelson Mandela had been imprisoned for over 20 years.
That's right. I found out, or I reported that he'd been, as you mentioned, that he'd been arrested thanks to a tip from the CIA while disguised as a chauffeur. He was actually, what I'd heard at the time was he was actually on his way to meet an undercover CIA, an American diplomat who was actually a CIA official. So it made it rather easy for them to alert the South Africans where to find him. I thought it was particularly interesting to report when I did in 1986, because at that point it was just when the sanctions were being introduced over, voted through by the Congress over President Reagan's veto. So, and I'd noticed that in the sanctions legislation, it said there should be no official contact with the South African military, and so on and so forth, except when intelligence required that, they did have to have contact. So it was ongoing, this unholy relationship, which had led to Mandela being arrested and locked up for all those years, continued on through the 60s, through the 70s, through the 80s. Absolutely flourished with for example, the NSA routinely handing over intercepts of the ANC to the South African secret police.
This is the National Security Agency that is, of course, the subject of so much global controversy right now. The NSA gathering this intelligence to give to the apartheid regime.
That's right. I mean, it was just absolutely routine. And this was all, maybe they would have done it anyway, but it was certainly in the Cold War context. I mean, it's hard to remember now what a sort of lather people got into about, the Soviet threat to the trade routes, and there was a naval base, South African naval base, or there is one at Simonstown near the Cape, and there was, I remember, sort of the right, the defense lobby were continually going on about the terrible threat of the Soviets maybe getting hold of, the Simonstown, seizing vital facilities. And it was an absolute, people, not surprised, well, people have sort of forgotten just what a Cold War battleground Southern Africa was. Not only did they turn over Mandela, but they had this very close relationship. U.S. military intelligence cooperated very closely with South African military intelligence, giving them information about what was going on, what they were collecting in the rest of Southern Africa. And in fact, the two countries, the CIA and the South Africans, collaborated on, assisting the UNITA in the horrible civil war in Angola that went on for years and years, with thousands of people dying. So, this wasn't just a flash in the pan, the tip-off that led to the coordination on the arrest of Mandela. It was absolutely a very deep, very thorough relationship that went on for decades.
Well, in that vein, I wanted to ask you about the 1996 report by Jeff Stein and Salon that the CIA was involved in sabotaging the ANC for years. Stein quotes Mike Leach, a former South African intelligence operative who worked closely with the CIA, and Leach claimed that the CIA shared the recipe for a prussic acid, a, quote, clear compound which, if inhaled, would give a massive coronary. If a doctor's not looking for the acid, he'll put the cause of death down to natural causes. Another trick, Stein writes, was to, quote, launder anti-apartheid T-shirts in a fiberglass solution and hand them out to demonstrators who would soon be convulsed in uncontrollable itching. The CIA reportedly also offered training in bugging and wiretaps.
Well, that's right. It shows that, this is the agency that gave us the exploding cigars sent to Fidel Castro, or designed to be sent to Fidel Castro. These sort of fascination with these rather puerile tricks, went on. And were considered. I'd never heard any report that they actually did manage to give anyone a coronary or cause them frantic itching, but it was certainly in the scheme. I mean, there was, the CIA, and the other side of it is, of course, the CIA was meanwhile spying on the South Africans. And had very good report on for instance, the South African nuclear program, and the collaboration, the very active collaboration of the Israelis in that program. which they fed back to Washington. And of course, nothing was ever done about it. So they knew perfectly well what was going on, but no action was ever taken.
Andrew Coburn, you write in your 1986 piece that the clause in the new law, the Comprehensive Anti-Sanctions, the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid, sanctions bill that was introduced by Ron Dellums, the clause in it exempted intelligence cooperation from sanctions. That's very important.
That's right. I mean, that was slipped in. Well, not slipped, I don't know, inserted, obviously, in the legislation by the intelligence people here, even though they may have regretted the whole imposition of sanctions anyway. They made sure that their unholy relationship was ongoing. And this, 1986, and as I said, we saw the fruits of it ongoing, through the rest of that decade with the war in Angola. I mean, it was a huge operation that people have completely forgotten about.
Andrew, we have to wrap up, but the Philadelphia journalist and professor Lynn Washington wrote a piece this week, Obama failed to deliver long overdue apology to Mandela. Your thoughts as we wrap?
Well, I think, he did, certainly, and it would be nice if, there was some acknowledgement of just how, of the relationship that helped sustain apartheid for all those years. I mean, I don't think it would have, existed and survived with such force, let alone keeping, sending Mandela to jail, if it hadn't had such thoroughgoing support from this end, from here in Washington.